Christmas is upon us, but I hope and pray that all of you had a wonderful Thanksgiving. I hope you were able to go and visit your family and friends or have them at your home and to sit around a table, a feast, and remember and thank God and appreciate God for all the blessings that have come your way. And we indeed have been a blessed people. Ginger and I were able to spend Thanksgiving in Indianapolis, Indiana, with her sister and her family, and it was a wonderful time together. However, it only took me 7 days to remember why we don't live up north. When we got there, it was kind of snowing, about 15 or 16 degrees, and it makes you wonder, why would anybody live here? During the course of the week, being an in-law, I tried to be as low-key as I possibly could, stay out of trouble, not say anything that was controversial or anything like that. And I was sitting over in Ginger's sister's den, minding my own business, and she said, "Ronnie, would you mind doing me a favor?" And I said, "Absolutely not. You've taken us in for a week. You're going to feed us, put up with us. Whatever you ask, Connie, I will do." And she said, "It's not a big job, but it's one that's important to me. Would you go outside sometime this week, and you see those 2 concrete planters out in front of the house? I'd like for you to take the dead mums out of the planter and replace them with my Christmas topiaries." I've been trying to call them tulipularies the whole week. And I said, "Connie, that sounds like a no-brainer. Be glad to do it." So the next morning I got up and I went outside and went over to the first planter, was going to take that pot out of there, and it was frozen solid. I said, "Where on earth does dirt freeze?" I said, "I can't believe this. This dirt is frozen." So I was struggling with that pot to get it out of the dirt and do what Connie asked me to do, and I heard the garage door open. And it was Connie's boyfriend, and he came out, and he was holding a hammer and a chisel. And he said, "Ron, I think you're going to need these." So he handed me the hammer and the chisel. And for an hour, I chiseled frozen dirt out of these planters so I could put in those tulipularies. And I finally got them in there. And during the course of the week, and during those 7 days, it only took me those days to remember why my parents, back in February of 1951, made the decision to leave Minnesota. We were coming home from what I think was an Advent worship service in the little town of Mora, where I was born and baptized at Zion Lutheran Church there in this little town. Is anybody from Minnesota here? Have you ever heard of Mora? You haven't? Well, that's okay. Nobody else has either. It's all right. It's a little town, and the population sign there hasn't changed in 50 years. It's still 2,500 people. I think they quit counting. But anyway, we were coming home from a worship service, and the farm, my parents, we were, believe it or not, dairy farmers. And my dad shared a dairy farm with his brother, and he had been there since 1945 after the war. And we were coming home from church, and my dad said that we made the turn, and all the roads in Minnesota and in the Midwest, Indiana included, go north, south, or east and west. It's very organized. And even if it comes to a curve where you have to go from going north to going south or whatever, it's like a perpendicular turn. Well, Dad said we came to the perpendicular turn where you turn to go down to our farmhouse, and there was 8 feet of snow on each side of the road. Snow all over the road, pouring down snow, and simultaneously, my mother and father looked at each other. Now, my mother was from Virginia, and she says, "Harvey, there is a better life." And sure enough, my mom and dad packed up the 2 boys. We were in the back seat, packed us up a few days later, everything we had, and we moved from Minnesota to Durham, North Carolina, where my dad got a job at Duke University. So it only took me 7 days to remember when we were in Indiana why we don't live up north. It helps me to understand you as well. I have only heard one person in this congregation, and that would be you, Miss Bobette, say that after they retire or whatever, they're going to move back up north. The rest of you who are from Ohio and Wisconsin, you have sense enough to stay. And so I understand that, because it is really, 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 really cold up there. As it only took me 7 days to remember why we don't live up north, it's taken me about 7 or 8 ventures into the Old Testament to be reminded why we as Lutherans don't spend a whole lot of time in the Old Testament. God is so surly. He's always warning us in Jeremiah, Isaiah, Amos, and throughout the Old Testament that if we don't do better, if we don't obey those 10 commandments, if we don't follow Him more faithfully, He is going to wipe us out. And even in Isaiah, he predicted that there would be a terrible time for people who didn't follow His ways. And remember, in the Garden of Eden, we learned right away what kind of God is. He gave Adam and Eve one rule to follow, and they broke that rule. But did He give them a second chance? Absolutely not. One mistake, and He threw them out of the garden. We should have known then what kind of a God we were dealing with. And listen to this from Isaiah. This is the angry God, the surly God, the God who has taken the Israelites to Babylon in captivity to be there in exile because they didn't behave, they didn't come back to Him, they didn't follow Him faithfully. God says, therefore in a single day the Lord will destroy both the head and the tail, the palm branch and the reed. The leaders of Israel are the head, and the lying prophets are the tail. For the leaders of the people have led them down the path of destruction. That is why the Lord has no joy in the young men and no mercy, even on the widows and orphans. For they are all hypocrites, speaking wickedness with lies. But even then the Lord's anger will not be satisfied. And listen to this. His fist is still poised to strike. You know, I was reading a couple business journals this week about how to communicate with people you're doing business with. And they said that the lowest form of effective communication is through anger. Both the articles, independent of one another, said that when they approach a customer who is angry, they try to end the conversation as quickly as possible. Because when a person talks to another person in anger, the person to whom they are speaking immediately turns the other person off. And this is what has happened throughout the Old Testament. God has told the Israelites over and over and over and over again, if you don't straighten up and be the people I called you to be, I'm going to wipe you out. And He did it. He destroyed the beautiful temple that was in Jerusalem. He sent the Israelites into Babylon in captivity. And I'm wondering, when were the Jews going to finally say to God, well, have at it. Have at it. You've been telling us for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years you're going to wipe us out if we don't straighten out. You should see by now that your expectations of us exceed our ability to fulfill them. And I wonder why they didn't just walk away. Imagine raising a child in anger, constantly telling the child they don't measure up, they're not good enough, and if they don't straighten up, you're going to have to leave the house. I have had it with you. I'm done. What would that child turn out to be later on in life when you constantly tell that child over and over again they're not good enough, they're not living up to your expectations? And then when they finally give up, you make them leave. Well, this is why we Lutherans don't dilly-dally too much in the Old Testament, and why we are very thankful that we live on this side of the prophecy that is in Isaiah today. It says right here, "For a child is born to us, a son is given to us, and the government will rest on his shoulders, and these will be his royal titles: Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father," and listen to this, "Prince of Peace." It is at this point that God is realizing that his way of communication with his people is not working. And so he developed a new way of bringing his people home. And I'd like to read an example of what happened in the New Covenant. And the first one has to do in Luke, the Christmas story, where the angels come to the shepherds. And this is a clue as to the difference between the Old Covenant and the New Covenant. It says right here, the angels come to the shepherds. Now, the shepherds were on the outside. They were the people that didn't go to church. They were the people that didn't obey God's law. Those were the people that had given up and said, "I'm not even going to try to please God. I'm just going to be out here and do my best at being a shepherd and let the chips fall where they may." But the angels come to the shepherds, and of course they're scared to death because they experienced this God of anger. But the angels say, "Do not be afraid. I bring you good news of a great joy for everyone. The Savior, yes, the Messiah, the Lord, has been born tonight in Bethlehem, the city of David. And this is how you will recognize him. You will find a baby lying in a manger, wrapped snugly in strips of cloth." God has changed his mind. He has changed his way of dealing with us as a people. And St. Paul says it best in Romans chapter 3. He says, "But now God has shown us a different way of being right in his sight, not by obeying the law, but by the way promised in the Scriptures long ago. We are made right in God's sight when we trust in Jesus Christ to take away our sins. And we all can be saved in this same way, no matter who we are or what we have done." Now, isn't that better than hearing the God of anger? Isn't it great to be a part of the God of the New Covenant? And St. Paul finally says in Romans chapter 3, verse 28, "So, we are made right with God through faith, not by obeying the law." But one thing that hasn't changed about God from the Old Testament to the New Testament is like the God of the Old Testament. What is the one thing that really made him unhappy? When he did not feel appreciated. Well, Jesus is that way too. Because remember when he healed the 10 lepers? Do you remember how many came back? Just one. And he asked, "Where are the other 9? So even though we have been made right with God through faith in Jesus Christ, he still loves to be appreciated. Everything that needed to be done to make peace between God and his people, Jesus has done for us. And that's why we celebrate Christmas the way we do, is because we are so glad that God came to the conclusion that there had to be a better way to bring us back to him. And so all we have to do now is to let Jesus know how much we appreciated his gift. And really, is it too much to ask of us to simply come back here on a regular basis and simply say, "Thank you"?